When I leave home in the morning, I get back home around 11 p.m. I spend my whole day in the library. If I'm not praying, I'm learning. And when we wrote the WASI exams or the high school exams, to my amazement, I did not perform the way I wanted to perform. I mean, I had no A's at all. My heart was broken because then I knew that medical school was out and some of the top things I would apply for were completely out. I was lying on the floor just crying. So hard work or grace? My name is Reverend Dr. Albert Agbi. I'm the lead pastor of the Edified Church, and I'm also a physician specialist at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, and now pursuing a fellowship in cardiology. I'll say a bit about my academic journey. Started when I was much younger. I've always been an excellent student, and so I got used to that. But when we wrote the BEC or the basic examination to enter high school, it was a time when they started a government placement, computer placement system. So I went to check the school I was given, and I realized that I did not get one of the top tier schools, as you may have it. Not to say some schools are not better, but the schools I was expecting, I did not get them, and I was placed in another school. I told my dad I was not going to go to the school I was placed in. I would probably take the BEC again so that I could get the schools I wanted. But I remember my dad told me something. He said, good schools don't make good students make good schools. So if I believed I was a good student, I should go to the school I'm placed and prove myself. So I took his advice, and then I went to the Udome Senior High School. I mean, it was not what I wanted at all. So I was actually in the business class, and because I was given business there, not science. And so, I mean, I went to the business class for like a month, and I was there, was with the business students. I did accounting and some other courses. I went to see the assistant headmaster at a point, when school had gone on for a while, that, I felt off in the business class, and I knew I wanted to do science in some of the schools I chose, which were not given to me. So he looked at me, tried to assess my performance and see whether I would be able to do well. He warned me that science class is a tough class, and they had already taken off, and it would be very hard to catch up. But if I was persistent and I wanted to, the changes would be made. So he agreed, and I was sent to the science class. In fact, when I got to the science class, what he said was true. They had gone ahead, they were writing all these equations I had never seen in my life. I was a bit intimidated. But I knew I always wanted to do science, so I stayed in the class. And then I remember we were writing scholarship exams that year, and the one who becomes first and second would be given a government scholarship in the school. So, we wrote the exams, went on vacation, and then when we got back, I remember that when I was in the class initially, many people didn't know me because I got there late. They had already started when I joined them. So later on, then some of the teachers were asking who Albert was and all that, and I realized I was the first in the class. So I won the government scholarship with another friend of mine whose name is Selassie, and the two of us got the government scholarship. It was quite a smooth ride because usually I'm either the first or with the first. It was great. It was amazing. And so I had a very great 3 years in the school. And when we wrote the WASI exams or the high school exams, I was in high hopes because I knew I did very well in the mock. I topped my class in most of the subjects and things like that. So it got to my head. I was just expecting a certain great outcome. And then so when the results were released, we were home, and I remember I went to visit my sister who was working at the time as a nurse in Akachi. So I went to check in one of the internet cafes. This was somewhere around 2008. And to my amazement, I did not perform the way I wanted to perform. I had no A's at all. Of course, my worst grade was also a B. So my best and worst grade were B throughout, just a chain of B's. No A, no C. But my heart was broken because then I knew that medical school was out, and some of the top things I would apply for were completely out because even with straight A's, it was technically impossible to get into medical school because many people were getting A's and there were very few slots. So I was heartbroken. I remember that day I got home to my sister's living room. I was crying, because I knew that was the end of the road for me. I was crying, and I remember I was lying on the floor just crying. And then my sister had this DVD that was playing a worship song at the time, and it was, I think, Clarence McLeod's This Is the Hour of Visitation. So the song kept on playing back and back and back and back. It would play and play again. This is the hour of visitation. And he talked about it, don't give up. He spoke about not giving up. If things didn't go well, you could attempt again. So I heard that song until it got to my heart. And then this scripture jumped out to me. At the time, I've always been a lover of God. But if you are excellent somehow academically, sometimes you tend to trust in your own strength, because you are hardworking and things are going to go a certain way. So the scripture from Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11 stood out. And I know the plans I have for you, plans of good and not of evil, to bring you to an expected end. I love the version that says that to give you a future and a hope. And lying on that floor in 2008 in Akachi, there was a renewed sense of hope. And then I met a friend in town who was also one of the best students in St. Augustine's. His name is Oscar. He's now an engineer somewhere in South Africa. And Oscar told me that, Albert, I'm going to buy university forms. At the time, I was not thinking of buying any forms because I felt like I hadn't done well. So I didn't want to buy any of the forms, but peer pressure, because he was going to buy the forms. I followed him, and then, in fact, I gave him money. He went to Ho, and he bought the forms for me. The university forms. We bought KNUST and Legon. KNUST didn't pick me at all because I hadn't done well. But the good thing about Legon was that I had written NOVDEC. My same friend encouraged me because he was going to write NOVDEC, and we both registered for the NOVDEC. The NOVDEC, rather, I had A's. And then the WASI, which I had faith that I would virtually top my class and all that, or maybe even not top my class, do well myself. That didn't go the way I expected. So I applied for the Legon, and then I was given biological science. The good thing about that was that when I did biological science, I got straight A's, for the medical school entrance. The worst grade I had was, I think, in physics practicals. I had an A-, but for all the other courses, maths, biology, chemistry, everything, I had A's. And it shocked me because just a year prior, I wrote an exam and couldn't get an A. And what God did for me in that period was the fact that he destroyed any kind of confidence I had in myself. So I knew where I am today is God, because if it was my hard work, I wouldn't have been where I am today. I remember I used to talk to Oscar, and there was no way I was going to get into medical school. And to realize that I went to school that same year, somehow the NOVDEC came, I used the NOVDEC results, and then I got admitted to University of Ghana to do biological science and later on to do medicine. And, I decided that day that, knowing very well that I did not get to enter because I was excellent, although I knew I was excellent, but because God made a way. He made a way. I knew, my back was against the wall because my friend Oscar had A's throughout. He went to KNUST to do, I think, petrochemical engineering. He could have done medicine anywhere else, but I just look back and I realized that there were people who had A's and who had all sorts of things from better schools and things like that, but didn't get in. Somehow, God made a way for me. I got in, studied medicine, finished, and then specialized in internal medicine, now pursuing cardiology. When I look back, I realized that it was technically impossible, if it was just my strength, because I didn't know anybody. There were no connections. There was nobody that my dad knew who would have, put me in or something like that. It was just God. So I remember when I got my admission letter, I was so stunned. I could not believe it, not because I was not hardworking, but because I knew from where I was, there was no direct link to where I wanted to be, but God made a way. And it's the reason why I decided to give my life to serve him. It's the greatest gift I could ever give to God was my life. It was not any money I could have given to him, was to just offer myself on that altar and say, God, whatever you want to do with my life, do it. And it's been a testimony, because the kind of places I enter, the places I go, if God hasn't opened those doors for me, I wouldn't have been there. I know there are some people who have family connections and friends, and maybe their hard work had gotten them to where they are. But for me, I cannot stand anywhere and say it was my hard work, it was my connection, or it was anything. But I realized that even with the intelligence I have or whatever I have, it was a gift from God. And God had to allow that failure in that part of my life. I termed it failure because for me, B is a failure. All through my life, I've had a principle. When I was in class 1, class 2, class 3, although it was 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. If I get a B, I feel it's an F. Like for me, B is an F. So that senior high school experience was like a blot in my journey. But I realized that there are times that God allows certain things. Not because he doesn't love us. Not because God couldn't have given me A's. Because in the Novdek, I made the A's. It was the same me. But, he just had to allow it to reset me to just realize that it's not because I'm smart. It's not because I'm intelligent. It's not even because I top my class or maybe I'm the first in biology or something. But because he has decided to make a way. So hard work or grace. 1 Corinthians 15 verse 10 is the answer. Apostle Paul, who was one of the most remarkable apostles of the New Testament, said to the church in Corinth, I labored more abundantly than they all, yet not I, but the grace which was given to me. And his grace towards me was not in vain. You see, his grace towards me was not in vain. So Apostle Paul said that, yes, it was the grace of God, but the grace made me labor. So you can see the grace people receive by their labors. If you see someone who tells you they are walking in grace and you don't see any labor, they have not received any grace. Grace produces works. Faith without works is dead. So the evidence that you have faith is that there are works to show for it. So if you are going to be excellent in any area of pursuit, in ministry, it means that you are going to receive grace for ministry, and grace for ministry would make you work hard, would make you steady, would make you give yourself, would make you prepare before you preach, would make you give yourself. So the labors in a man's life shows the grace the man has received. So if you see a diligent person, it means the person has received grace to be diligent. So grace is not a license for laziness. You don't say I'm a Christian, so you don't read for an exam, say you go to the exams room and then you say kabara, you say some tongues hoping that something will drop. No, it doesn't work like that. The grace makes you diligent. The grace makes you studious. God blesses the works of your hands. So if there is no work, there is nothing for God to bless. God doesn't just bless a man. He blesses the works of the man's hands. So works are very important in your pursuit of success. Going to school as a medical doctor whilst pastoring and being a husband and all that, I try so much to minimize non-productive activities. So when I leave home in the morning, I get back home around 11 p.m. I spend my whole day in the library. If I'm not praying, I'm learning, and I believe that there are many people out there who don't see the wisdom of hard work. But I know one of my spiritual fathers told me something, that if you come around an excellent person, you think it's solely hard work. You think it is they have the results they have because of hard work. And then you think that it's also only grace, because there are parts of their life that hard work can explain, and there are parts that grace can explain. So it's a lot of hard work, commitment, dedication. If you are a student, commit yourself to read. And not just read once, read and read again, and read again. Because, sometimes people think I'm just smart. No, I read and I forget, and I have to read again. People think that, maybe you have a photographic memory. Yes, for some things, when you see them, they stick. But for most of the other things, you would have to read them again. And I have a steady partner called Emmanuel. I've spent more time with him this year than any other time. We learn, he asks me questions, I don't get it right, I check again. You have to play every possible scenario in your mind, every possible thing the lecturer can ask, and answer them in your preparation before you go to the exams room. And that scripture has played out in my life, that the thoughts that God had for my life were thoughts of good. And that failure in that point in my journey couldn't have changed God's thoughts towards me, couldn't have changed where He's bringing me. I'm not yet there, but I can see that where I am now used to be impossible. It used to be impossible to be where I am now. And the same God who brought me to this impossible point will take me to other places that I may not even have faith for. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. It's been an honor to share my journey. God bless you.